Washington hands out a bunch of money to this Great Osobor kid.
Mountain West Player of the Year last year.
Yeah, I guess he's pretty good, but I don't know. $2 million for NIL seems like a lot.
Well, and I still wonder if he got $2 million. I mean, this is the agent that put that out there. We hear all the time these giant numbers that they're like, oh, this is NIL, and we know for a fact that a lot of these are the kids are getting nowhere near that. But
well, this says, according to documents reviewed by ESPN, his NIL agreements include marketing assurances, and they were negotiated by agent George Landberg of GSL Sports. And this says that they will, the agreements that he has in place will give him the highest known valuation in college basketball this season.
Yeah. Well,
and his name is great.
And to me, when it says that there's $2 million waiting for you, I will wait and see if he collects $2 million. But either way, kid's a good player. Ends up at Washington. His coach, the sprinkler from Utah State, went, and so it makes sense. But dude,
we don't really know what they collect, do we?
No,
we don't really ever get the real numbers.
No,
so there's no way to know.
Exactly. So again, I'm somewhat skeptical that he's getting $2 million, but he's obviously getting a bunch. So
now, where did they come up with that? Like all of a sudden, Washington's just tossing money around like nobody else?
I do have a buddy that's tied into that program, and Montlake Futures, who is their NIL, realized that they got to get their ass in gear. I think Oregon scared the living hell out of them, still does, because Oregon's is paying out, and Washington for a while had this approach of, well, we'll pay you once you get here, but we don't want to pay you to come here, and that didn't work out. So they're on board. The Boise State coach, their football coach, recently came out and tried to make a statement. He had to kind of backtrack it. His whole thing was the same thing. We don't want to pay for players. Well, then you're not going to get players in the transfer portal.
Yeah, I saw that. I thought that was a really dumb thing to say.
And he backtracked it a little bit. He basically said, we're not going to stop you. We're just not going to help you get those before you get here. Because,
yeah,
well, welcome. You may not like it, but this is the nature of the beast, that if you want someone named Great, who's the player of the year in the Mountain West, you got to pony up, because if you don't, someone else will.
Well, that's exactly what happened. It sounds like they had to give him this much money because he had similar deals on the table from Louisville and Texas Tech.
Well, there you go.
But what Washington had that those two didn't, beside the money, was Sprinkle.
Yeah.
That's his coach.
Well, so you got the coach, and you got $2 million, and now you got a great player. And hopefully that can lead to something. But, that's, in fact, I was listening to Charlie Baker, who's the new president of the NCAA. He gave a big, long-ranging interview today, or I guess it was over the weekend, and I was reading through some of that. And look, the settlement is coming. He didn't exactly say that, but read between the lines. There will be a settlement in these lawsuits coming probably within the next, let's go, 4 to 6 months. And once that's settled, revenue sharing is coming. Like, there will be a pool for these players somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 million bucks. And that's going to be on top of the NIL. So for every one of these dudes that's all mad that college basketball and football is about money now and paying players, just realize over the next year, it's about to get way, way worse, because you're getting a cut. And a good hunk of it is going, is going to be going to the star players.
The Athletic did a sort of Bruce Feldman kind of sold it as like a deep dive. It wasn't all that deep, but it was. They put out a piece on how the portal and NIL works. Mm-hmm. And it's worth a read, because all it is just quotes from players, agents, collective CEOs, coaches, assistant coaches. It's the perspective of each of those positions, yeah. Right? And it's, it sheds light on what it's really like. Like, 'cause it's really kind of like mysterious to us. But the couple of takeaways from it that I thought were interesting was there was one NIL collective CEO who said it's already getting very agent heavy. Mm-hmm. He said it didn't start out that way, but now anybody who's a good player, like the G5 players, they're just with their parents. Yeah. But the good players, most of the Power 5 players,
they got agents.
They have agents.
Yeah.
And with agents, one of the agents said he prefers to deal with coaches because coaches don't really care about the NIL money. They're like, I want that kid.
Yeah.
So the agent likes to end around and go with the coach, and so that the NIL overpays, which could have been what happened here.
Sure, sprinkle and
with Washington. The agent gets to the coach and says, "Hey, how much you want this guy?" Well, we'll do what it takes. I need my guy.
Yeah.
And then the NIL collective's like, "Oh crap, that's a lot.
Right,
Wouldn't have paid that."
We got to pony it up.
But it did kind of highlight that the NIL collectives are very much in touch with the coaches about roster construction.
Mm-hmm.
Like they are in sync on what the needs are and how much they're willing to pay.
Yeah.
The one I think the most interesting nugget in there was that parents are now getting separate NIL.
That's awesome.
They are.
Yeah, pony up for mom and dad.
Well, one, they're big influences over the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ended up happening was, I think it was an assistant coach who was explaining that, or maybe it was an NIL CEO who said, when you give kids money, the parents usually take a big cut of it anyway. And so the better kids' parents started just saying, well, wait a minute, I don't want to take my kids' money. You have to give me money too. And so that's now a thing. Parents are getting NIL stipends.
Well, and look, I'm not here to take shots at anyone, but this is moms and dads and uncles have had their hands out for years, from, Reggie Bush's parents to Cam Newton's dad, Mario Chalmers' dad. I mean, this is
true.
This is on and on.
But the money should be for the kid, not the parent.
But it's not. It's,
well, it is now.
Yeah, and at least now I guess it's somewhat above board now, right? Like, there's no rules against it.
Well, there was a coach that was quoted and they're saying, hey, look, everybody's crying about NIL. He goes, 95% of it that I see is fine.
Sure. Just the 5% that probably gets
you always
creepy.
Hear about the 5% that it gets hairy or, stuff goes down. But he's like, most of it's working fine.
And I do not think in any way the NIL is negative, because all this stuff was going on with paying players. Now it's just above board. You can at least talk about it. If you, again, go back to Reggie Bush and SMU and those Miami teams. You don't think, and John Wooden and the UCLA squads, for any of these old heads that are like, back in my day. Dude, John Wooden had one booster that was paying for kids' abortions, for God's sakes. Like, that UCLA team was built, might be the dirtiest college basketball team of all time, but we hold it up as some sort of pristine thing. Like Coach K at Duke. Coach K at Duke did a phenomenal job, and he ran a clean program, but you don't think that those Duke players were getting paid? You think Christian Laettner went there for free? You think Jay Williams didn't get something? Zion Williams? Stop it. Every one of those kids was taken. At least now you can do it and not have to hide in the shadows about it. But even now that it's above board, it's still viewed as like, people are like, oh, you just bought your team. Exactly. Which is what you were doing before. Now more people can do it. And wait until the settlement happens and there's revenue sharing, because that's actually going to have to come from the schools. See, right now the schools can bitch all they want, but remember, they're not paying for any of this. This is boosters. When the settlement happens and the NCAA comes up with some cool new rules, that 20 to 25 million, that's coming from conferences and schools. Then those schools are actually going to have skin in the game, because they're going to have to foot that bill every year.
Yeah, the one thing about that, though, that I feel like is still dangling out there is that they're going to have to collectively bargain that.
Yes.
Like, they can't just say, oh, here's what we're going to pay you.
Yeah, so Charlie Baker in the interview, he said that the reason why this, if you don't know what we're talking about, there's a bunch of lawsuits coming down the road that are happening right now where they are suing for back NIL. They're suing for antitrust, saying the NCAA kept my clients, basically class action suit, all the players, from making money. And they're going to lose in court to the tune of $4 to $5 billion. And the NCAA is saying, we know we're going to lose, we're going to settle. So they're going to settle for about $2.5 billion. But the NCAA will not settle until part of the settlement is a collectively bargained set of rules going forward. And he said that the cool part about that is once we do it, it's going to provide financial opportunities for these kids that they've never seen before. If you think the NIL money was good, wait until you have NIL from the boosters and 20 million flowing from the school into these kids' pockets, and that'll be everybody getting paid. And we just need to figure out what structure that is. But it's going to happen sooner than later, and that's from the NCAA president.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that is not like it's the college it's the university is saying 20 to 25 million.
Yes.
That's what they're kind of budgeting out.
Yeah.
So they probably have an idea.
An idea of what it is.
But
yeah.
if I'm the attorneys for the players,
they are. They're holding it.
that ain't the final number, man. You know, depending on what school, depending on the revenue numbers, you know, it's like you can't just say, okay, here's 30,000. Wait a minute. No.
Yeah.
75, please.
Well, and that's why this is taking so long is that the Baker, the president, said we can't settle without structure going forward, because if we settle and we don't have rules in place, they're just going to keep suing. They're going to keep suing.
That's
so,
right. Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see what happens. We thought this would be years down the road, and it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like this is going to happen relatively soon, and maybe within the next handful of months. And won't that be interesting?